In the next few seconds, we're now live.
Fantastic.
And it is 9:30. We've got a couple of people in the chat already.
It's almost like we can actually do this on time now, Andy.
Yeah, got a couple of Australians. An American, got Lindsay in.
Hey.
So that'll be mid-afternoon. Yeah, about 3:30 for you, Lindsay, I think. That's Texas, I think, for Lindsay. No. Hopefully a few more people will join us shortly.
That's confusing. I'll get myself looping back through them on the preview.
Right. Okay. Let's get started properly then. Good evening, folks. Good evening, everyone watching live, and good evening to people. Good day, good morning, whatever time of day people are listening to this, audio-wise, and from different time zones.
Greetings.
Welcome. Yeah. Welcome to Makers Waffle. I'll get straight in. This evening we have the fabulous Ruth Amos here to have a chat, and well, let's get started. 1 minute. Let's go two floor elevator pitch. You got 2 floors. It's not a super fast elevator, but it's not super slow either.
If we're going 2 floors, surely it's going to be easier to take the stairs.
I mean, yeah, I'm all for everyone taking the stairs, keeping active, you know. So I'm Ruth. I am an inventor. I started inventing when I was at school. I won an award. I was Young Engineer for Britain back in 2006 when I was 16 with something called the Stair Steady, which is a specialist handrail which allows people to go up and down their stairs, like the step before a stair lift. Up to that point, I wanted to be a lawyer, which looking back would probably been the worst career for me ever. I actually wanted to be a barrister. I mean, I like to talk. I like to argue. I would have liked to have been a barrister, kind of, maybe. But yeah, then I won this engineering award, got thrown into this whole world of engineering, and spent a lot of time learning new things. I started a few companies, a few different projects, worked as an ambassador for different STEM things. And there were kind of 2 things. I kept coming back to why did I not want to be an engineer? Because my younger sister's an engineer, my younger brother's an engineer. Looking back, I was always destined to be an engineer. So why did I not want to be an engineer? And the other side of it was like, how can we encourage more people to think of engineering and making and STEM as great careers? So they were kind of questions that I spent a lot of time thinking about. And I was talking about these with my friend Sean, and we realized that media and what people watched on TV when we were growing up was important, but now it's YouTube and having great role models and projects and things you get involved with. I loved Scrap Heap Challenge. I loved I love Robot Wars now, but I grew up watching very early Robot Wars. And I didn't see that many women making. There were a lot of women presenting, but not many women making. And I think that's where I kind of made that decision that maybe engineering wasn't for me. And so when I started to meet all these women that were engineers and realized actually I wanted to be an engineer, I wanted to do more to encourage other girls so that at least they saw it as an option. I'm not saying every girl should want to be an engineer, but they should at least think that it's an option for them. So to cut a very long story short, Sean and I spent a lot of time, about 7 years, talking about different projects, and we ended up talking about starting a project on YouTube, and that ended up being Kids Invent Stuff, which is a YouTube channel where we bring to life kids' invention ideas. And then Sean and I build them, 4 to 11-year-olds from mainly the UK, but across the world, send in their drawings, their pictures, and Sean and I bring them to life, film it all, embarrass ourselves, put it on the internet. It wasn't quite an elevator pitch. I apologise, but
no, that's good. It was three floors, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it was an elevator pitch in the Shard.
Well, I think it takes about 20 minutes to get to the top of the Shard, doesn't it?
Oh, does it? So, I've got more time then. Great, I'll carry on.
Back to the beginning. Start again.
Yeah. Do you have to start an elevator pitch again if it goes back down to the floor you started on before going back up?
Oh, I don't know. I'll get to the point where it will definitely become waffle. People will be like, "What is she saying?"
Welcome.
I mean, this is it. But I don't know whether it'll be the caffeine in the tea, or the Prosecco that will get me waffling. One of the two, or the combination.
Yeah, one will sort of bring you up, and the other will bring you back down. So
Exactly.
yeah, sort of even itself out.
Yeah. So I'd like to go back to your school days, because as I
Trust the
think
teacher.
you know, as you think I know, I used to be a teacher, and STEM was my thing. And in fact, I did try looking back through some of the kind of resources I still have to see whether I could find mention of you when you were Young Engineer of the Year, but I didn't successfully manage that. Possibly
You'd have to have
because
gone back quite a long way. 2006 was a long time ago now.
I started teaching in 1996, so yeah, I was more than covered. I could have been one of your teachers. Both of you, actually. I think we worked that out, didn't we, Jamie? Yes. So you invented you invented a thing. I know Jamie wants to talk about this thing, and you have mentioned it as part of your GCSE in resistant materials.
Yes. Yeah, so I went to a very normal state school, actually about 15 minutes from where I still live. At the time, there was something that schools could get, which was like a college status. So they had different things. Maybe it was like sports, as was engineering. So we had engineering college status.
Specialist school status.
Specialist school status, yes, which meant that we had to take, as students at that school, we had to take a subject that counted within engineering, which was, I mean, it included a lot. You could have done food, you could have done textiles, electronics, graphic design, and resistant materials. There might be one more. And we had to take one of those. And I saw it as an option to do something that I really enjoyed. I did quite a lot of GCSE exams, a lot more that were quite academic, and I wanted to do something quite practical. And I quite liked the idea. I was one of two girls in my class, which meant it was a very different kind of feeling atmosphere within the classroom, and I quite liked that. My teacher was incredible, Mr. Stokes. I mean, it was one of those classes as well where it was, you weren't in sets, mixed ability, and he was able to take, from all the different kind of academic abilities, he was able to bring the best out of people. So we had kids in our class that would not sit through any other class but his, all the way through to quite academic students. And he would manage to kind of work with that whole class, get us all interested. And he was really the one that started to see that when our coursework project was announced, so it was supposed to be around storage. Everyone was supposed to do a project around storage. And I was expected to design a jewelry box as a girl. That was just the kind of expectation. And I just thought,
two things on the list, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, I thought, why? I could go, you get to Argos and buy a jewelry box. Why would I design a jewelry box? And so I sulked, and Mr. Stokes set me a challenge. And I am not the first student that he set this challenge to. I've had messages from other students in the past who've been set this challenge before. But it was around his dad, who'd had a stroke, and his house wasn't suitable to have a stair lift, but he wanted something that would allow his dad to safely walk up and down his stairs. So for rehabilitation, walking's really important. And so he wanted something that would allow his dad to walk up and down the stairs. That was kind of the challenge that he set. And out of that project came the stair study.
It is an absolutely genius product as well as project, I suppose.
It's very simple.
Well, that's exactly what I was about to say. Is that it's such a simple and beautifully executed product that does exactly what it needs to do. There's no wall around it. There's no extra rubbish. There's no features for the sake of features. It does exactly what it needs to do, and that's something that it seems to be getting more and more rare as any kind of business model. And that's something
I think
that
it came out
appreciate.
Of naivety, if I'm honest. I had no idea about product design. I had no idea about what you should or shouldn't do. And in fact, when we first showed the product at an actual mobility show, I had people come up saying, "Oh, we've been trying to do this for years." And I remember looking at them thinking, like, this is really simple. Why can you not do this? And realizing now that that's because as soon as you enter an industry, or, I'd not even gone through university. I'd not really studied product design in any form, really. Resistant materials was about making things. It wasn't necessarily about product design. And I think that was one of the things that, looking back, I couldn't do that now. And that's the thing. It was a product of that moment in time, that very naive 16-year-old girl. Now being in the industry, you see things in a very different way. This is why I say, when I go into schools and talk to students, is that they have a unique viewpoint on life. They will often see the simple solution because they're not bogged down with all the other stuff, all the kind of culturally stuff within this business. You're supposed to do this, or this is how mobility works, or this is how this sort of industry works. You don't have that as a student, and that makes you a really great designer.
Yeah, because you don't have the kind of the programmed in limitations, I suppose, do you? And that's something that Andy and I've discussed before in that kind of sense of, attacking a project from a different vantage point often gets, huge leaps forward. And that being a perfect example. It's, as I said before, I suffer with my back quite a lot, and that kind of thing, the stir steady is a very, very useful thing for me, because that's something that that often end up like trying to crawl up the stairs, because it's about the only option. You're probably the same, Andy, with yours as well. And it's something that, because I hadn't come across it until a couple of weeks ago. When Andy was saying, right, Ruth's coming on the show, I was like, I've only sort of seen, because I saw you and Sean on Colin's channel.
Yeah.
Doing the bunk baths, and I'd never seen you guys before, despite having a daughter who's interested in STEM. Just hadn't come across the channel, and it was a really weird kind of. I was thinking about it before. It was a very, very weird sort of experience of like having watched Colin for years and years and years and years, and then seeing you guys kind of on the channel with him. I don't know why, but for some reason there was just this moment of like, Colin's managed to get in with some big production company that's, like a changing rooms type, super high end TV production. Maybe this is to give his channel a bit more of a boost. And he's
I'll tell him that.
6 million at the time.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll. Yeah.
But that was my first impression of seeing you guys on that was just, this is two super high end professionals, dragging a YouTuber into it.
No, Colin was definitely dragging us along, but it's, I appreciate that. I'll let him know that we kept,
But yeah, I mean, that was why I sort of, I didn't, for some reason, didn't go and seek you guys out until the other week. But that kind of, doing it a little bit of due diligence of, I suppose I better find out something about the next guest. Oh my God,
You will, of course, be catching up on all
amazing.
the available videos at the soonest
Oh,
opportunity.
you've got
Already
so much content, so much content to watch.
I'm working my way backwards. But
yeah, that's probably advisable. The early ones are very interesting.
I mean, you're further on than me, even just on your personal challenge with or personal channel with the workshop build. You've got more videos than I have. So.
One, I'm hoping to get more. I've been hoping to put another one up for a while, but yeah, I realised, I've been talking about doing my own channel for years, probably about 3 years now, and lots of different things stopped that from happening, or it didn't happen as fast enough as I was hoping it would. And now I've got a video up, I'm feeling, I've entered the hamster wheel. I've got to keep running. I've got to produce content, but I haven't.
I was going to say, a video with 75,000 views. 75,000 views as of this evening.
I was not expecting that at all. So it kind of, I was very, I mean, Kids Invent Stuff started off with nothing. We didn't have a following. We didn't have, Sean and I barely had any sort of following on Instagram or Twitter or anything. So we started with nothing on that channel. And looking back, it took a long time to get to even where my channel is now. Every single subscriber was a real graft. And it is still now. Do you know what I mean? It's a very different channel. It's family viewing content. You don't instantly look at it and go, that's the channel for me. Does that make sense? It's kind of, it's not always as easy to understand who the audience is. So I was fully expecting my own channel to be just as hard. And then to see, the first video, just went mental. And I'm very honoured that over 2,000 people have even subscribed to a channel with one video, because I'm not sure that I would. So thank you. If you have subscribed, I appreciate it. And I will be putting up more content.
Yep.
But I think some of it was around, I did an Instructables, and Raspberry Pi shared it, and just generally kind of a great community that shared it. And it, the algorithm loves that sort of thing, doesn't it? And it did quite well. And
I mean, that was something that I noticed when I was watching that video. I thought, I'll just scroll down, see see who's in the comments, and it was just basically like all of our friends, mutual friends, and it was really, really wonderful to see that sort of thing of, like you say, of a channel of someone who I'd only sort of recently found, and you've already got this like massive following of these other wonderful people that just seem to be really encouraging and bringing you along, which is.
And with any channel, I would definitely say it's quality, not quantity. It's great to look at some of the bigger channels and be like, oh yeah, that must be lovely. But also, I think actually, I would be quite happy if my channel stayed at the same size it is now, but everyone was just lovely, because it's just nice to build that community, isn't it? And sometimes if you grow incredibly fast, then you don't have that same community, if that makes sense.
The trolls arrive.
Yeah, they do.
A group of lovely people versus a lot of absolute strangers.
Yeah, and you can see that in the comments. You can see a mix of comments on there. But I've been doing this for a while now. I'm quite used to the comment section. Yes, it is very interesting. I occasionally like to make a note of certain comments, and I happened to ask Sean the other day if he'd ever got similar comments to some of the things that I get, and he has never, ever. No one has ever commented on his appearance. No one has ever said anything inappropriate. So it's very interesting, actually. Yeah, it's like a little social study.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, obviously, as Andy and I are two hairy white dudes, it's there's no chance of us ever sort of fully understanding the position you're in that sense. But even just from trying to fathom it is just really difficult. So I can't imagine the sort of the daily struggle, really. So
I think sometimes you just have to ignore it. I have a very good group of friends around me who also have channels, and we just like to share ridiculous comments sometimes, and that makes it better. We just vent to each other.
Yeah,
I can imagine. I remember
I think that can help in the kind of content creation world, kind of being able to have a few people that you can kind of go, I've had this comment, am I being ridiculous in kind of thinking that this is a ridiculous comment, or the like. And I mean, sometimes it's very easy to kind of go, well, I'm just going to delete that, that's no problem at all. And
I think everyone deals with it in different ways, don't they? Certain people have very strict criteria, and I think that's probably one of the hardest things about producing content is the other stuff. I mean, producing the content is quite tough, but actually then once it's out there on the internet, dealing with people's comments and feedback back on your content. And sometimes you just have to take a step back. I'm very lucky with the Kids Invent Stuff channel that Sean kind of often will monitor that, when they scrape the comments, the inappropriate ones, he will go through that inbox. Occasionally, if something is funny, he will send me a screenshot of it. But that's quite nice, because I know that there's a bit of a barrier there. Yeah. But then obviously when things come through live, when you're answering and you're like, oh yeah, can't ignore that one. But yeah, and often I think I've learned this in business, is that sometimes if someone is cross or they're typing certain types of comments, it often reflects more on them than it does on the content. And often when I react, it's because I'm having a bad day, or do you know what I mean? And sometimes I have to take a step away and come back. And some of them I just ignore them. Yeah. But I think I do think sometimes a lot of that just reflects more on the person that's commenting than it does.
Do you have like a mental picture of the commenters? Sort of like Grinch type character or something. Maybe?
Occasionally, I mean, sometimes I do think, how upset or how painful can someone's life be that they feel the need to spew certain hatred on the internet at people? But The positive
Yeah.
side outweighs the negative, but sometimes it's the negative that will stick in your head, and you just have to
Absolutely.
move on from that. So yeah, it's all good.
I think that's a common thing in all sorts of life, isn't it? Yeah, you're driving somewhere. I drove up to Surrey yesterday, and yeah, just over an hour each way, and kind of all I can sort of think about is the idiot. I'll use that term loosely. Who gave me a hand signal because I followed the flow of traffic and didn't let him out in his rather poncy little BMW.
Don't hold back, Andy. Say it how it is.
Yeah. But what was quite it was a bit of an obstruction. So there's an obstruction, and it was easier for me to get through. And I'd been waiting for quite a long time, and he obviously was a bit impatient. He really didn't like the big VW 4x4 that was coming right behind me and didn't sway either. So yeah, but I remember that. Yeah, over probably close to 2.5 hours of travel time yesterday. It's that one moment that I remember most, and not the other kind of 2 hours and 20 odd minutes of nice travel thereabouts. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I want to go back actually. Did Mr. Stokes' father ever get a stair
He
steady?
didn't, unfortunately. No, he passed away, unfortunately. But I'm still in contact with Mr. Stokes. I'm still, yeah.
And is he? I can imagine as a teacher, when a student does well after school in your field and they keep in contact, it's one of those sort of things you kind of go, yeah, I had a bit of involvement in that, and yeah, the new kind of cohorts come through, and you go, yeah, that was one of my students, yeah, and things like that. So I can imagine it's nice to keep in touch with students when you can.
He had retired a few years ago, but his daughter is a teacher. So that's lovely. I went and spoke at her school a while back.
Cool.
And that was just really lovely to talk to her class and just explain how important her dad had been in kind of my general life. Not even career, just general life.
I think something that's often forgotten, that teaching isn't just necessarily about the subjects. As teachers, we don't always know when that happens. It's nice to kind of get a feedback sometimes. Yeah, sometime I lose track of time now because of the lockdown. But I think it was before the lockdown. I bumped into one of my students who I taught from year 8 through to year 13. So we kind of we got to know each other quite well, and it was just like, nice to bump in, find out what he's doing, and things like that. And it's nice to get those kind of little bits of feedback every now and again. Now, did you take? I think I happen to know the answer to this, but for the benefit of the audience, did you continue with kind of resistant materials into A level?
So I didn't do resistant materials at A level. I did maths, further maths, and physics. And then, because I thought I might want to study engineering, but I actually decided to take a few years out to bring stair steady to market. During that time, I'd also, as part of winning the award, I'd then gone on to, which is the Intel Science and Engineering Fair in America, so as the UK representative for that. And decided that actually there was a lot of interest and potential in this product. And I'd had a lot of people approach me wanting to sell it. And again, me being very naive, a lot of the companies that had approached or been interested, I wasn't quite sure if they'd do a good job. I had certain values that I wanted to uphold. And so very stubbornly, I decided to take a few years out and launch the product. And I gave myself 3 years. And at the end of the 3 years, I decided that I didn't want to go to university because I was doing stair steady and other projects and things. So A level is the highest qualifications that I have. And I say that I have very lightly because the award that I went to in America, the engineering competition, I flew back from that 2 days before my physics practical and was very jet lagged, and I fell asleep in my physics practical. So my A-level results were maybe not that impressive. Thank goodness for the engineering awards, because I did have some university places, but I decided just to take a few years out. And I felt like as much as I'd loved school, I discovered this whole world of doing stuff, and actually then going back and writing things. Yeah. And as well, I'm pretty sure that I am dyslexic. So actually, it turns out like writing is not really my thing. And I managed to struggle through with it with school, but actually it's not something I massively enjoy. And anyone that's had an email exchange with me will probably, So.
Now, I mean, thankfully I'm not employed by a school now, so I can actually sort of say I actually like that you didn't kind of get pushed into going to university, because it's great that more people go to university now than in my day. I mean, in my day it was less than 10% of young people went to university. Universities were much, much, much smaller, and now it's 50%. And in some ways, I think that's great, but I actually think possibly it's now too many people going to university, because there just aren't the jobs in any sector to support that number of graduates, and there's an awful lot of young people accruing a lot of debt and not necessarily then getting into the sector that they want to. And kind of from a moral point of view, I have issues with that.
I think if I was to do it again, I would definitely look at an apprenticeship. I was pretty much through school pushed to go to university. It was kind of a decision that I'd made and ran past my parents, that I'm thinking I might not actually submit my UCAS application. And I had to sell them on the whole, like, we'll give it 3 years and I could apply as a mature student. And, if Stair City's gone horribly wrong, I'll have some great stories to tell in an interview and all that sort of thing. But yeah, it was a little bit of a shock to a lot of people that I didn't go. And actually, even when I changed from wanting to study law to studying engineering, I had still pretty much picked out where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. And it is kind of still weird looking back, because all through my school career, I was pushed that, about going to university. So I still do find it a bit weird that I never went. It's great. I mean, I'm glad I didn't, but it's just one of those weird things that you kind of always expected to do, and I never did.
Yeah, definitely. So if you were going to do, if you were to go back and kind of revisit things, if you were going to be doing an apprenticeship sort of after Stair Study, would you do something like business, or would you do engineering?
I would probably do something that involved a bit of a mix of them. I enjoy both sides of it, but I enjoy engineering more. I enjoy the making of it more. I enjoy...
It's the fun side, isn't it?
Yeah, I enjoy the fun side. I spent a number of years where I had a number of businesses, and if you'd have looked me up and kind of said, what does Ruth do? People would have introduced me as an entrepreneur. And I didn't enjoy it that much. I didn't really like the more corporate style of life. I got to do some really cool projects and learnt loads, and that has kind of really set me up to be able to run kids event stuff and look at how I want to be able, how I can do this as a kind of full-time maker in one sense. But I love this side so much more. And it took, it was quite, I remember the first few months that Sean and I were doing kids event stuff, and I always had to remember how to like enjoy myself and laugh again, because I was so used to having to be very sensible. And, from 16, I was quite often, I did a lot of like non-exec roles, a lot of trustee roles. I was the youngest person, usually on the board, usually the only woman, constantly having to look older and act older. And it was just so nice to suddenly be like, oh, I can be a child again.
I can only advise growing a beard, because that's exactly what I did.
But yeah, I'd spent so much of my time trying to look older than I was, that suddenly I was allowed to, be the age I was. And I was like, oh, this is weird.
It's a bit of a weird one, actually, that, because, I mean, I'm not too dissimilar there. I started an IT business at 15. But it's a similar sort of thing of, like you say, having to interact with people who are generally at least a decade or two older than you, and you have to sort of get past that. Oh, I'm still a young person, because I suppose it's probably, I would imagine, very similar, treated differently for your age as for your outward gender appearance, and I think that's something that I suppose the only bit of appreciation that I've actually really got. But that was my kind of foot in the door, was just growing the facial hair, because then I sort of looked a decade older.
Well, this is it. My brother, my brother runs his own business. He's 5 years younger than me. He started quite young. Again, I think when he actually set up his own business, maybe he was 17, 18. But he is 6 foot something, and facial hair. And I remember I just learned to drive, so I'd be 17. And we used to all swim competitively. So we'd train. I live near Sheffield, so we'd swim at Ponds Forge. And I drove my younger brother and sister training. And I somehow managed to get the car in one of the lovely cement pillars at Ponds Forge. And I couldn't quite get the car out of the pillar. And one of the parking attendants came up and tried to give my younger brother the keys to get me out of the car. And I was like, he's 12. So at 12, he already looked old enough to drive a car. So he was absolutely fine with the age thing. But yes, it is an interesting one, and people's perceptions and things. I'd spent a lot of time, kind of thinking a lot about how I would be seen as someone coming into the room, and to suddenly not have to care about that was just wonderful. So yes, it took a while though to kind of shake off some of the more corporate things.
Yes, it sounds like you've sort of done things a little bit more backwards. You leave school and go straight into the corporate world that you'd normally be doing potentially around the age you currently are now, and then you've now got to a point where you get to play with toys and tools and kids all day.
I don't play with kids. Can we not say that, Jamie? That's not a phrase that I like to keep my DBS, please.
Maybe a comma in there.
Yeah. As long as we can put that in the captions, that's fine.
Play with toys and tools.
Yeah.
With kids.
For entertaining kids.
Yeah.
I feel like we should just change the subject. Yeah. Maybe that's just easier.
Well, let's change it, but keep it kind of in line. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the Kids Invent stuff. And I'd like to know a bit about kind of the process of choosing the things that you build.
Good question.
Because you've had some crazy things. You've had some really interesting things, and you have that. I suspect that you're tapping into that kind of pre-teen creativity that gets pretty much smashed out by
stamped
the
out
education system. Again, I could say that as an ex-teacher, and I mean, do you get ones that are just too crazy? Do you get ones that are actually? As an inventor and entrepreneur, do you get ones that go, "Ooh, that's actually quite interesting"?
Can I steal that idea?
Or can we?
We don't ever do that, Jamie.
Can we help the child? Can we help the child to develop it for a future career? Yeah.
I have had a few people who've reached out and said, parents might say, "My child's had this idea. I think it's a good idea. We want to take it further." And I'm always very honest with them and say that isn't what we do at Kids Invent Stuff. If you think that there is something commercially viable in your product, please do not tell us, because you can't then patent it or protect it. And please go and seek the right advice for that. Sean and I will sometimes look at things and think that's interesting or commercially viable, or with the right lens could be, and we don't tend to build those sorts of things. I think the closest thing that we've come to something that could be a kind of commercially viable thing is the Lego jacket, maybe the disco jacket. You could see people wearing those, but again, they're all things that's not necessarily something that's patentable in that sense. So a lot of my business has been built up over intellectual property. So it's something that I'm very passionate about, and something that I try and educate people where I can with and about intellectual property. So the things as well, we're always thinking, we want the project to get people interested. They're going to see it on YouTube. We want them to click and watch it.
Mm-hmm.
We want young people, so we it's family viewing, but we play the content in schools, so we want to be able to play it in an assembly and the kids go like, oh, like that's incredible. We've just started to go back to some face-to-face stuff in schools, and it is so lovely to play the students the content that we've created over lockdown, because usually we kind of have a good idea, like there are certain points within, so there's certain kind of videos that we often play in schools and assemblies. So Connor's crazy car, have you seen that, the scissor lift in the back of the car? That's one of our most watched videos. We play that, and that's usually quite an opener, and they're like, what is that? And then we play things like jam firing rockets, and you can kind of tell how engaged the students are, because the more videos you play, the more the students start going, kids invent stuff. And it's like the best money Sean and I ever paid for is voiceover guy to say, kids invent stuff. And it's like the start of every video, and the first one they're like, oh yeah. But by the time you play the third or fourth video, if the kids aren't either whispering it under their breath or shouting, kids invent stuff, then you kind of know you've not quite hit your target audience.
Yeah.
And there's a point in Jam Firing Rocket where Sean throws a piece of toast, and in the slow-mo you see that the jams hit it. And usually in a school that's kind of half awake, because, morning assemblies, you hear a kind of like, oh, and in a school that's like on it, like clapping, like, oh, wow. So it's nice to see, and that can be literally, you can play that to kids in all different parts of the country. And, if you're playing it in an assembly, that's often the reaction. And Sean and I will judge that on kind of like, oh yeah, these kids are switched on because, of those reactions. So it's been nice to show them some of that content. But choosing the idea, we try and choose something that an adult wouldn't think of. So when we did water crossing inventions, we made shoes that allow you to walk on water, mainly because most adults would be like, why? Why would you make shoes? Why wouldn't you just build a boat? And interestingly, we do a lot of work around what the challenges are. So that challenge was going to be crazy boats. And Sean and I tested it on a few of the right age group. And there was some good inventions, but one little girl was like, why are we designing boats? And I was like, well, because we want to get across water. She was like, I wouldn't design a boat to get across water. I design a giant catapult to fire people. And I was like, yeah, we need to reframe that challenge, don't we? So we didn't launch crazy boats. We launched ways to, water crossing inventions, and we built some shoes that you walk across water on. So sometimes it's kind of a mix of getting the challenge right, and then also kind of making it vague enough that, the students can come up with something completely crazy. And, we say to them, like, you don't have to make this. Don't think about that. Think of something really exciting and interesting. So Sean and I have a lovely time once a month going through all the inventions and choosing what we're going to make. And we have so many, we don't ever get sent like a bad or a rubbish invention idea. There is no such thing. All of them have something where you're like, that's cool, that's great, to the point where we have a folder of like, we want to make these at some point, or this is really cool.
Cool.
But we spend a lot of time trying to work out, we have a few things to think about. We've got budget, we have time, and we obviously have the fact that it needs to fit the audience, the content. So for YouTube and for schools and things. So we have usually a couple £100 budget. So quite a low budget unless we get a sponsor or we do a bigger project. And then I live in Sheffield and Sean lives in Cornwall. So we have a very set amount of time to build. So usually less than a week to build and test the whole thing.
Wow.
So it's a busy time. It's very long days. We do a little bit of prep sometimes before, obviously components arrive. We do bits and pieces, a bit of testing. But yes, it's a wonderful challenge. I found that I like a good challenge. I like to start things. So I would start lots of businesses. I love that problem solving phase. And then when it gets to being like a normal boring business, I'm like, oh. So Kids Invent Stuff feeds my need for something exciting, because every month we've got a new challenge. And by the time it gets to the point where I'm like, oh my word, I never want to see this thing again, because I'm fed up with wiring something or that piece of metal doesn't fit where it's supposed to fit. We're moving on to the next thing. So it's the perfect thing for me. And I haven't started another business since because this keeps me occupied. So yeah, it's a wonderful project.
It sounds like you definitely found the sort of the bit in the maker community. That
so what year groups do you cook in? Upper primary or lower secondary?
Primary, so 4 to 11-year-olds. Yeah.
Okay.
4 to 11-year-olds. And, quite often we'll go into a school and do an invention activity with the whole school, lots of different classes. We get some great inventions. And I think the nice thing is you can do the challenge as a 4 or 5-year-old, or you can do the challenge as an 11-year-old. And I can't say, oh, we're going to build, the 10-year-old's idea, or we're going to, actually we've built all sorts of ages of invention ideas, as it was. And it's just about the idea. It's not about the drawing. It's nice to have a pretty drawing, as it was, but actually, you'll see on the channel, some of them are line drawings, some of them, a kid will be like, oh, I can't draw this. I'm like, it's fine. Just label it as that. As soon as you label something as it becomes it. It's fine.
Yeah.
But it's about the idea. Yeah, exactly. It's about the idea. It's about, say, I want to build a drivable treehouse. I want slime firing gauntlets. I want, it's about that idea. And Sean and I will be like, yeah. And sometimes it'll just be that moment. We'll be looking through them and we'll both just be like, we have to bring that to life. Yeah, a little bit like Connor's invention idea. So Connor's was the first big thing that we'd built. And as soon as we both saw the invention, we were at the Bradford Science Festival and we both looked at it. And I remember Sean and I looking at each other and being like, oh my word, we have to build this. Like, this is incredible. What a great idea. And we kind of kept it to one side because budget, we knew we couldn't, buy a car. It needed a scissor lift. It needed quite a lot of things. And I said to Sean, like, give me a few days and I'll see, because we have a very quick turnaround. So we close the competition on the 25th of the month. And usually by the first or second week of the following month, we've built and filmed the invention. So we've just closed our latest challenge and I go to Cornwall on Wednesday. And in a week after that, the whole thing will be built and tested, fingers crossed, hopefully, if nothing goes wrong. Occasionally, there's little reshoots of things, but we try because of obviously being together. So Connor's idea was there, and I was like, right, we have this date to get this budget, frantically, like calling anyone I know that might have some budget to be like, do you want to sponsor this thing? We want to buy a car. There's this great idea. And the deadline came and went, and I didn't have the money. I had a few people potentially interested, but no one had signed on the line. And I called Sean the night before and I was like, yeah, I think we're going to have to build something else. I can't get the money. And the next day, one of the companies called me back and was like, yeah, we can get you the money. And I was like, Sean, stop buying things. We're buying a car. And so he went and bought this beautiful car off this girl who was going to go play golf in the States and loved her car. And he daren't tell her that he's going to, we're taking it away and I was going to grind the roof off it and we're going to put a scissor lift in the back of it. And she's like, oh, I really love my car. And she was like, yeah. Please don't ever watch our channel. And so we had this car and yeah, there was quite a few things with the build, cutting the roof off it. We only had one go at that and we got the biggest grinder we could find. And it was the most incredible and scary thing because there was one attempt at cutting the roof off this car. And the other thing was trying to get a scissor lift inside the back of a car when what you really need to get a scissor lift in the back of a car is another scissor lift. And so that was definitely an interesting build. But yeah, we knew straight away, like, we had to build that invention because who doesn't want to be riding along in a car, be able to press a button and then berth through the top of the roof and drive 2 meters in the air?
It's like the Mr. Bean experience, isn't it, almost?
I've said exactly the same thing. Yeah.
Exactly, but probably slightly higher.
Yeah,
it's a little. It, yeah. No low bridges and no heavy braking.
Yeah. I suppose that you weren't on a couch either, so it's.
No, and we did have some. One of us drove while one of us was up in the air. We decided,
No broomstick through the windows and stuff.
No, we didn't need anything. I mean, a lot of the kids always ask, like, were you fastened in? I'm like, yeah, we were fastened in.
Gaffer tape to the chair, just in case.
I mean, it's just incredible what you are achieving. Do the obviously it's individual people that are putting forward ideas, and you're choosing one. Do you give them kind of sort of a preview of the video, or do you kind of just sort of say, do you message them and say it's going up, or do you just kind of hope that they will find it?
So if we build a child's invention, we always ask, obviously, if it's submitted on the website, that we have to have a parent's consent. The same at an event. So we'll have an email on the back of that. And so we always let the child or the parent know. Sometimes we do have them where people just never reply. So I don't know if it goes to spam. A lot of the time people do. We like to send the child something. There's this incredible book called My Crazy Invention Sketchbook, which is pretty much a staple that we send out, and sometimes other things. Because obviously getting insurance for this project was hard enough without then getting the insurance to send the invention to the child. So we like to recognise that, obviously. And there is a lot of pressure. Sean and I don't tend to tell the child until a few days or, before it's going up on the channel. And there is always that nervousness of like, are they going to like it? Is it going to go down well? Are they happy with how we brought it to life? There is a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Throughout the build, a lot of the time.
Haven't been happy though.
Not that they've let us know, thank goodness. I think that would be the worst, is letting down a child, and then a few of them, we've even taken them to live events. So things like the Big Bang Fair at the NEC, and we went to Makers Central, and people, some of the inventors have seen their invention in real life, which again is a real pressure. It's probably one of the biggest things, even probably more scary for Sean and I than dealing with sponsors and supporters like that, is actually the child, because you just don't want to. They have this idea, they've drawn it, they've spent the time. I don't think Sean and I ever underestimate.
Not blue.
Well, this is it. A lot of times I say, if you got, is there colours on it? We try and make it look so you can hold the drawing up and you can have the invention next to it, and it looks as as close to the same thing as we possibly can. But yeah, that's probably the biggest pressure that Sean and I face every month, is we're like, does it look like this invention? Will it work as well as the child has in their mind? Or will we do it justice?
I can imagine there's probably a fair percentage of them are just physically impractical, by either budget or
the laws
of physics. Yeah.
Yes and no. It is amazing how many of the great ideas you look and you're like, we had an interesting one the other week when we were in a school. Sean and I have just finished a project which isn't for our channel, and it was the first time that we built things that Sean and I had come up with, and the project isn't out yet. I don't even know when the project will be out, but one of the girls in the class had come up with one of the inventions that we built, and I was saying to her like how that was such an amazing sign that she was such a good creative thinker and inventor, because when multiple people think of the same solution or the same, think of, the same invention, that's actually really positive. That's a really great sign that people are thinking and problem solving in the right way, or, that is, I mean, I don't want to give away what the invention is, but it kind of is a problem and kind of isn't a problem. But that was a lovely moment as well for Sean and I, because we were like, oh, actually, yeah, we're thinking in the right way. This is the right sort of thing. And that happens with a lot of inventions where, you say, well, actually, we're not building this because, we have lots of flying suits, and we, sometimes I'll reply to parents and say, check out Richard Browning. We have lots of stuff. And I'm like, oh yeah, actually Hacksmith's done this, or Colin's done this, or have you checked out this? Sometimes we don't build stuff, but it's not necessarily because it's a bad idea. Often it's because there's something already out there like that.
For those who aren't familiar, you just mentioned Richard Browning. Now, I've been following Richard's work for a few years now. He's been kind of public domain for a few years. Would you like to just say what he's been doing? Because many people might not be familiar with his name.
Yeah, so Richard makes this incredible jet suit, essentially. If you want to see kind of the amazing journey that I was going to say a product goes, you can actually buy these. If you have enough money, you can buy these suits. Yeah. You might not want to buy them once you've seen his first prototypes of the suit. But he created this incredible suit that he wears with jet engines, and he flies, and it's amazing. And I'd really like a go. So if anyone would like to talk to Richard, I know a lot of other YouTubers have had a go. So
Colin has, hasn't he? Yeah.
I am trying to push my influence to be like, hi, woman here, I'd like to try it, please, thank you.
I'm sure you could probably use your name.
I don't think so. I think he's quite serious about getting, quite skilled people to try it. And I'm like, but yeah, I would like to.
Well, ex-competitors, if you were a competitive swimmer, you're going to have strong shoulders.
Yeah,
and I suspect shoulder strength and core strength is going to be the key thing to the flying suit.
So yeah, I mean, I'd like to. There was talk before all of lockdown of kind of racing series and things like that, and I have said, hello, I'd love to do that, please. But yeah, I don't know if that'll happen. But it is an amazing, and there's a lot of. I think a lot of the time when it comes to getting young people excited about engineering and science, it's about finding that thing that they are excited and passionate about. And for a lot of people, it is flying, and so we use it a lot as showing people, because this is what Kids Invent Stuff is about. It's about finding that thing, or we do lots of whether it's slime and mess, whether it's woodwork or metalwork or motors or electronics. It's finding that thing that excites a young person around science and engineering and showing them that it's so vast. And that's the great thing about YouTube and videos, and that's one of the reasons I really wanted to start the channel, is around representation and around actually having that content, because as a young person who, looking back, should have been an engineer, if I'd have seen more of Geeky Fayard or Ali or Simone or Stephanie, then that would have excited me in a way that maybe watching Scrap Heap Challenge, as much as I loved it, I just didn't see myself there.
There weren't many women on that, were there? I mean, I've watched, I think, pretty much every episode at least once.
Yeah, same.
And there weren't many female engineers on Scrap Heap Challenge.
No, and it's a real shame that I still see things now where I'm like, I know of people who would be great for this show, or a lot of the media stuff. And I think, absolutely. I mean, the frustration with media is one of the reasons Sean and I started Kids Invent Stuff, is because we knew that what young people watch is really important, the things that they do in their downtime. And when I was growing up, that was TV, and now it's YouTube. And so having content where young people can see themselves in that content is really important. And particularly when it comes to girls forming their opinions on what they can and can't do in careers, girls form that super early. So that's like 5 to 7 years old. Girls are saying, I can do this, I can't do that. And so it's really important. We spend a lot of time thinking about the way that we put the content together and we edit the content. So you might see that there are things that might be seen as typically female things that Sean might do. So we baked a gravity racer, and Sean did all the baking and I did all the racing. We try and think about some of those kind of expected gender roles and flip them, and try and just show people that actually they can be involved in this world and there is a place for them within making.
Yeah,
I suppose that's a good point, where with Andy and I both being fathers to young girls, it's something that we hugely, well, I'm speaking for you here as well, Andy, but it's something I certainly hugely appreciate. My daughter's grown up seeing all of these YouTubers who are then becoming her, the people she looks up to, like you say, people like Simone and like April and Christiana from Get Hands Dirty, people that she's
Laura,
and yeah, exactly, again, friends of ours and stuff as well, but that forming that opinion of seeing them do something and going, yeah, I can do that, and that's so critical. Like you say, it's young boys are told they can do anything they put their mind to, and all this kind of stuff, but it seems to be pigeonholed for girls, and that's needs to change.
It's interesting to see the stereotypes. I mean, as a teacher, I spent quite a bit of time doing primary liaison work, typically with science, because that was my main bag, but not always. And yeah, you're right. Kind of, I would often start with activities like, okay, we're going to going to do science, it was often for gifted and talented. Certainly in my last couple of roles, because I was at a grammar school and we were aiming at sort of the gifted and talented students. I often couldn't only work with small numbers, so it's kind of who do you pick, how do you pick? And it's interesting to see those kind of expectations, not expectations, the stereotypes that have already developed about what a scientist looks like. Yeah, I had a PowerPoint that I would often show, and it would have 20, 30 people on it, sort of all genders, races, dressed in formal wear to informal, lab coats or not, and kind of go, well, yeah, who are the scientists? And yeah, I give them a worksheet, and they tick off who they thought was a scientist. Yeah, right, okay, picture one. Do you think it's a scientist? Yes or no? And they all were. That was the catch. They absolutely all were. But it was interesting to actually sometimes flick through and see what people were thinking the scientists would look like. And yeah, I was the bearded middle-aged white dude with glasses and a beard, and a lab coat often. Yeah, I'm the archetypal scientist. Yeah, often mad hair, 2 pairs of glasses, and yeah, that was kind of the expectation. Yeah, I must be the science teacher. But of course, yeah, this isn't always the case, and in fact, on the whole, isn't the case. But there's still that kind of expectation, isn't it? And my last school was actually a girls' school, and it was very interesting seeing the difference in expectations en masse against kind of. I've taught quite a bit of my career was in all boys schools, so seeing the difference in expectations. But also seeing the difference in expectations between girls who'd come from different schools, and seeing how the stereotypes already developed, and sometimes by the time they're in year 7, locked in place. And
it's super early.
Change.
It's super early, and we talk a lot about. I think I saw STEAM in the comments. We talk a lot about STEAM, so we talk a lot about what engineering is, and the fact that it is so broad. And it's one of the reasons that I introduce myself as an inventor, not necessarily as an engineer, because when you say to a child, like, what's an inventor? Well, they problem solve, they make things, it's much more exciting. Whereas if you say, what's an engineer do? Quite often it might be they fix things, so
build bridges,
being an inventor,
houses.
yeah. I mean, sometimes, a lot of the time, they just talk about cars and fixing things. And then you kind of say, well, actually, no, I'm an inventor. We do lots of engineering. It involves science, technology, maths, art, being creative, problem solving. And I think it's just broadening their horizons with that, because, yeah, unfortunately, engineering has a bad rap, but it's just because it's so broad. Do you know what I mean? There's so many different types of jobs, and, careers within engineering are just, you can literally have, like you said, one end of the spectrum where you're, working from home in jeans and t-shirt, all the way through to, someone. I mean, I don't even know. Do you know what I mean? Literally, in everything. And we show them lots of professions and talk to them about the different roles that you could have within engineering. And I think that was the, Kids Invent Stuff was the way that we wanted to show them what engineering was. So we show them the build process, we show them the things that go wrong. We talk to them about, the fact that when we built the Rube Goldberg machine, it took 74 attempts before it would work, and all these sorts of things, because there's so many different. We can talk about food in there. We can talk about things that are made of metal. We can talk about electronics. We can talk about renewable energy. There's so many different types of aspects to engineering. And the hope is that they see that and they get excited by that. And when you go into schools and, you're talking to 6-7-year-olds and they're talking about linear actuators and motors, and you're like, yes.
I want to share for the viewers who I've seen this on YouTube. I want to share a statement that Lindsay Murphy's just shared. Lindsay Creative on Instagram. So your 9-year-old daughter, and a future guest, she has already agreed, and definitely on the list.
Lindsay signed
to
up.
Get her on. Yeah. So my 9-year-old daughter says she won't grow up to be a scientist because she already is a scientist.
It's absolutely fantastic.
and that is just that's a fantastic thing.
I mean, kids are the natural
I just
scientists,
love
aren't they?
that. Exactly, totally. I've got to be careful, but I could go off on a complete rant and
Set him off.
diatribe here that I won't, because it would take away. But I want to actually kind of just step back a little bit, because there's something that, again, it excited me a little bit. You said STEAM rather than sort of STEM, and this is certainly something that within sort of certainly the teaching community can generate quite heated debate as to whether it should be STEM or STEAM. And there's definitely people that are firmly in one camp or the other. And
but I just, a lot of the education system has a number of flaws. We are still educating
totally.
We're educating our children for the Victorian era. Yeah, really. So a lot of it is about preparing them for life after school. And I don't know of any engineer or scientist who doesn't have to use some sort of creativity. Now, they might not see it as artistic. They might not look at the code. In fact, actually, most code developers I know will look at their code and be like, it's art, it's beautiful. But there is always problem solving. There is always creativity. And I think it's important that we're showing that to young people. And unfortunately, schools have to put things in silos, and they teach your science and they teach their maths, and actually it's all combined on a daily basis. There isn't just a project where we just use engineering or we just use maths. It's all linked together. And all of that is interweaved with art, with creativity, with, everything that we produce on the channel. Art is interweaved through all of that. And that's before we've even talked about the production, the filming of videos and all that sort of thing. And I just think telling young people that art and creativity and their creative spark is not important is ridiculous, because that's the thing that sets us apart from machines. I did a big piece of work with Nesta around the future of work a few years ago. And we need to be really getting kids, teenagers, to think about creativity and to think about what they do better than a robot, because there are a lot of roles where robots will be coming for our jobs. And the one thing that they can do that robots can't is their creativity, their problem solving, their artistic skills. And so we should be celebrating that. And actually, school, there are so many people I know where school was not the place for them. I was very lucky. I had a great memory. So I managed to get through school with people thinking that I was vaguely academic. Sean is dyslexic. He doesn't have a great memory, bless him. And he struggled at school, but he is an incredible engineer. And, he won the same engineering award I did a few years after me, which is where we met. And that got him to university. It's really weird, because if you'd have lined us up at school, people would have been like, is Sean going to uni? But he did. And he he worked incredibly hard. He's got 2 degrees, one as a renewables energy engineer, and the second one in fine arts. And he would say that both of them are both as useful to what he does as a job and what he did before Kids Invent Stuff. And I think anyone that is growing, raising their children to just focus on science or maths or engineering, and they're not thinking about the art and creativity, is unfortunately raising them to be unemployable, or whatever employment will be in the next 10 years, because who knows?
I think it's quite interesting.
That's my little soapbox.
Yeah. I totally agree. I am aware that
schools
face pressures from
I feel so
all
sorry
directions.
for schools. There's so much they have to do, and Sean and I are so lucky that we go into incredible, predominantly state schools, who are they are literally magicians. What they do with such limited funding is incredible. And it's because those teachers give their hearts and souls to those students, and they shouldn't have to do all of that. But at the same time, they are expected to provide certain grades and to assess students in a certain way. And it's just ridiculous. Do you know what I mean? It just really is. And I could rant about it for a long time.
Maybe we'll have to have It could be kind of
An
Part two.
education one.
Yeah, we'll have to have kind of maybe an education one, and there's a couple of other people we could probably get on and chat about that. I mean, I think just to kind of maybe draw that part of the conversation to an end, I think it's quite interesting. And I can't remember if it's. I'm pretty sure it's Imperial College in London. A number of years ago, and I don't know if they still do this, and I might need to look it up. They were actively advertising for students to join their undergraduate engineering courses that didn't have the traditional maths, physics
Interesting.
sort of background, and they were actually taking people. They wanted top grades. They wanted top. I mean, Imperial's a difficult university to get into anyway, so you have to have top grades. You know, they're pretty much up there with Oxbridge for kind of entry requirements. But they were looking for people, English or art students who had top grades, and their principle being that they could teach them all the maths and physics they needed to know. But the thing they were struggling to teach was creativity.
Well, this is the reason that Sean ended up doing a fine arts degree. So I believe it was in Falmouth. I might have got this wrong, but they were looking for other people to do arts degrees that weren't artists. So he was on a course with lots of people from different kind of backgrounds to do a course in fine art. And obviously, you know, having that engineering background, that they wanted that to kind of look at that creativity and those different aspects. And yeah, I think, you should have Sean on. He can tell his story better than I can tell his story.
We're going to ask him. We've not asked him yet, but he's definitely on the wish list, yes. I think a little bit about kind of, at the moment, for the last few months, I've been doing a daily drawing exercise. And that, I hadn't drawn until last October, that's technically the end of September. I had not actively drawn since I dropped art age 13, 14 to take my options. And yeah, it was that basic idea that, I was going to be the scientist. I loved science from primary school, and I was going to go into science. And probably for me, engineering might have actually been a better option. But careers education, you listen to certain people and you don't necessarily get the best advice for you. But it's like a case of, you got to choose now, art or science. And you're science, so you should really do science. And I basically people say now that I'm doing art, and it's taken months of doing daily art and people telling me that I'm doing art to actually believe that I'm doing art, because I've spent the last
and good art at that
30 odd years. Well, that's debatable, but I spent the last 30 odd years not being an artist, and it's an interesting thing, isn't it? I always fall back on, I believe it's still the most popular TED talk by Ken Robinson of how schools kill creativity. It can be a sort of topic.
I think it's always hard. A lot of the people within our field that do well have some sort of neurodiversity, and schools kill that, and then they feel like, oh, actually, the amount of makers that I meet who are dyslexic, have ADHD, see the world differently, or autistic, and actually I think that makes people better engineers and problem solvers.
Back to the world, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And you need that. There's a reason why we need more women to be engineers, because we need more diversity. We need more people sitting around the table who, I don't know, if you've had a corporate job, you've all been in those meetings where somebody says something about their life, like, well, my child does this, and you're sat there thinking, yes, you're white, middle class, you've got no idea, your child goes to private school or whatever, and you think, we can't take your child as the be all and end all of everyone else's. We need that representation. We need people from different backgrounds. We need people from different different neurodiversities. We need different genders, the whole thing, because if not, we make mistakes. There are so many examples within engineering and products where people just haven't had that diversity, and their algorithms don't work, their product doesn't test.
Of the general population, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting talking about the sort of the corporate world and engineering. I work in an engineering field myself, and our electrical design engineer is female. and happens to be a phenomenal engineer and faces that same pressure all the time whenever she goes into a meeting. And there's always that same sort of. Fortunately, it's actually getting less common now, but that same sort of thing of looking to the nearest guy that's from our company to verify answers or things like that.
Yeah.
And quite often you get that the guys, obviously we know how much of an amazing engineer she is, and we all go to her for advice and help anyway. So quite often that when like turn and speak to one of us, it's like, I haven't got a clue. She's the engineer.
There was a really interesting article about two people that job share. One's male and one's female.
I nearly brought that up before.
Yeah,
they swapped their email accounts.
Well, they swapped who was replying on it, because the guy was like, "She's great, but she's really slow." And then they swapped, and the guy realized, "Hang on,
it was accidental at first, wasn't it?"
Yeah, she has to justify like every decision to all the clients, and she had a whale of a time because she had the other guy's name at the bottom of her email. Everyone was like, "Yeah, it's a great idea," and she's like, "Wow." But yeah,
I know a couple of people who do that, who have women who are entrepreneurs who have a kind of like a backup,
a guy, who replies.
And
it's very common. Lots of creators I know have that. Lots of creators have
absolutely, the
people
kind
who
of the higher level consultants answers the questions, or
which is just disgraceful that we have to do that. But this is the thing. I think women have decided they want to stay here. It's weird, that, isn't it? We've decided they want to stay in these roles, and we've found ways to get around that. But no, it is sad.
That's creative thinking as well, isn't it?
Well, this is it. I'm really interested about how people got into the jobs that they do. So I'm constantly asking people, like, what do you do? How do you do that? I'm just fascinated with people who get to do really cool jobs and really cool stuff and get to shape the world around us. I'm like, how do you do that? Like, what did you do? How did you get to be the person that designs the shard? How did you end up as like someone in femtech? How did you, how do you start, producing this sort of content, or producing video games? And so I've even set up a podcast where I go around and I ask mainly women, but and non-binary people about their jobs and how they got there and what went wrong along the way, because I'm just fascinated. I always have been. Meeting people and being like, you do what? How do you do that?
I'm very much looking forward to that podcast. Very much looking forward.
Thank you. There's a bit of pressure, but I'm very excited. There's some amazing. I've been very, very honoured to have the time of some incredible people, and hopefully it goes down well, and I get to add some more incredible people to that. So very excited.
Cool.
Well, I can tell you for the shard, for the ventilation system on the shard, I work with the guy who did the drawings for it.
Oh, nice. But this is it. I used to think, until Stair Steady, I used to think that there were like special people who made the stuff around us. And it took a long time to realize that actually that could be me. And it's one of the things that was a really big turning point, was seeing a drawing that I'd drawn in the classroom come out of the end of a factory as a fully formed product. And I hadn't necessarily made all of it myself, because, it was welded and made to a certain spec. But seeing that come off in a box and then be installed in someone's house was like mind-blowing. And that is hopefully what we're doing with the channel, is we are taking these drawings, these ideas from future inventors and designers and engineers, and they are seeing that actually their ideas are viable and that they could be made and they're great, and it's hopefully encouraging them. Because I realized quite early on that, even if I design a handful of things that go on and affect people's lives, if I can bring in more young people, particularly girls, if I can bring in some more engineers to solve those problems, how many things are they going to design and affect? And just think of that as a legacy. Is like, I could go and spend my life making a handful of things, but actually if I can just get more young people into engineering, into careers around STEM, then actually that's better for everyone, right?
I'm really hoping that your channel keeps going. And keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. And you get to a point, because I suspect you probably haven't been going long enough yet, where you're going to see people in engineering who are going to come up to you at events and go, I'm an engineer, I invented this, or I'm an inventor, or I'm a designer, or whatever the role is. Say, I did this
because of you,
because of Kids Invent Stuff.
Oh yeah, most of the people are still at primary school or a little bit older, but it is, I love going to Maker Central and seeing people with projects and like ideas, and it just is insane to see, and also to see other young people who are maybe like were 13, 14, so maybe not kids invent stuff age, but they get the whole making, they like the content, and then you see the stuff that they're doing and you're like, yeah, you're going to change the world. And it's nothing to do with necessarily the work that Sean and I are doing, but just the fact that they feel confident at that age. When I was 16, it was super tough to be able to prototype anything or to make something. The first prototype of the stair study was made out of bits of tires. And, you look at a picture of it and you're like, what is that? Whereas now you can order stuff online and it arrives the next day, and they're components and they're things that you would never have even, I can order metal, and it's not because I'm a business. I can order metal as an individual to my house. I can weld something up. I could never have necessarily done that, 15 years ago. It was just the fact that someone had saw the idea and wanted to support the school, that I was allowed to go in the factory and make the product. I wouldn't have even known how to start. Whereas now I could make a stair study technically in my workshop, and I know I'm very lucky to have the space, but it's much more readily available in maker spaces, in schools. I go into schools and they've got 3D printers and they've got small laser cutters, and you just think it's incredible. The Big Bang Fair, which is the competition that Young Engineer fed into and became, they've just done their round of judging and awards, and I was very honoured to be asked to judge, and seeing the projects were just incredible. And you just think like, insane, absolutely insane. And just the things they can make in their bedrooms now, mental.
Yeah, I can concur. I've taken students to Big Bang Fairs, and as a teacher and as a scientist and as a teacher, going around and seeing what some of these young people are achieving whilst they're in school.
It's insane.
It always amazes me. It absolutely knocks my socks off to see what's being done. And I used to love kind of going. I used to often spend a lot of time in sort of the tech departments, the technology departments, and just seeing sort of what some of the students are making. You get, like you say, you get the people who are just making the jewelry box or the. It's fairly, that's okay. That's
just
really
the jewelry
pretty,
box.
but it's just a jewelry box.
There are a lot more. I mean,
Yes.
One of the things that amazed me was, it was probably about 5 or 6 years ago now. There's a thing called F1 in schools where teams compete and they build stands and they build these racing kind of, I think, little wooden cars, and they race them.
CO2 powered bolster.
CO2 powered, yeah. And the stands that some of these students had, they were programming, Arduinos and Raspberry Pis, and they looked better than most of the corporate stands I've seen at trade shows. And they were being put, 12, 11-year-old students were creating these incredible things. And I'm thinking, if I saw that on a business stand, I'd be like, that's really cool. The fact that you want to do that, it's all off your own steam. You've coded the whole thing. You've got this bit laser cut and it does this, and this lights up when this happens and this spins. And you're just like, that's incredible. I am not worried about the future generation. I just think we need to keep doing more, and we need to do more younger. So there's some amazing engineering stuff and science things, and we need to keep pushing that and making sure that they're supported. But we need to start doing it even younger, because it's a bit easy, kind of, maybe sometimes, to get corporates to invest at kind of GCSE, A-level, university. Telling them they need to invest in primary is an interesting conversation, but the more we can do at that level, the more it will filter through, and we end up with a lot more people saying,
we can have a long conversation just about that. I spent years arguing that many schools, the kind of the emphasis put on what are we going to do about get our year 11s, our year 13s the best results, and they kind of plough money into year 11 and year 13, and which is age 16 and age 18 for those in other countries. And I kind of got thinking, no, we need to put the money in at the lowest possible place we can and build the best foundations. Mm-hmm. By the time they get to year 11 and 13, they're sorted. They're fine.
It's almost like having a race, and you start off in primary, and partway through there's a giant sign that says like, if you're a woman or you're not academic, take this route. And then people are stood at the finish line going, why have only 5 people finished? And it's like, because you are signposting them further on to say, like, this is not for you. You can't do this. This isn't the place for you. And then they're going like, why do we have a shortage of engineers? Why do we not have enough scientists? And you're like, because you are not focusing at the right points within that system. You are not showing them that they can be the people that shape the world.
How many studies have been over the years, on child development that say, around the ages sort of 5 to 8, whatever you teach them will sort of stick later on in life.
Even earlier than that, there's several studies that I've seen that suggest things like gender determination within subject bias is happening by the time they're 3.
No, I mean, I don't necessarily mean that kind of pre-programmed stereotypes for later life. I mean, like actual physical skills, problem solving, or things like that. Sort of teaching tools that they're the time to sort of bury those little seeds in, because they will, at any point down the line, if they then start looking into a STEM field as a profession, these things will sort of come back, and the foundations are there, sort of thing, rather than teaching to run around with toy guns or dolls, depending on which colour top they're wearing on a day, or that kind of thing.
Well, there is a colour top, yeah.
Right,
we're at 10 to 11. I think this is going to be our longest running of the episode so far. Which is no. Do not apologise. This has been a fantastic
I did already
talk.
pre-warned everyone.
Yeah, I think we could probably, if Maker Central goes ahead, which, many of us hope that it does, and if you're there, I'd love to kind of sit down.
Sean and I are hoping to. Yeah, Sean and I are hoping to make it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of crossing our fingers, I think, for that.
Just a bit.
Jamie and I, we've briefly kind of sort of mentioned this to you already, or I have, Ruth. One of the things that we would like to do at some point, and I think you've already agreed, but we'll kind of do this for the audien's sake.
Oh, so I'm signed up, so I can't back out of it.
No, you can't back out. No, you can't back out now. One of the things we're very aware, as we mentioned earlier, we are two middle-aged. Well, he's younger, I'm old, so we average out as middle-aged. White dudes with beards. Yeah, we're kind of
and glasses.
Middle class. Yeah,
the
approximately
stereotypical
middle class. Yeah, we are a pair of blokes. And one of the things that we would love to do, and we'd love you to be involved in, is to have another episode at some point where we almost take a background seat, but we want to hear from people like yourself and from other female and some non-binary people who can kind of go, look, please educate us as to what we can do to help our daughters, what we can do to help other people's children, or whatever gender identity they have, and how can we not be part of the problem? Because it's very easy for us to think we're not part of the problem because we want to be part of the solution, but we're also aware that we can by default be part of the problem, and we'd love to talk about that.
As Ruth said earlier, you don't necessarily know what you don't know, and I know that part of our kind of part of my upbringing certainly was things that were acceptable. I mean, I'm in my mid-30s, and even then, things that I was taught as a kid, like this is now socially acceptable. You can't say or do this anymore to X, Y, or Z person. That is now not socially acceptable, and things like that. That I know that there's a lot of learning I've done over the last decade or so with friends who've come out of various places they've been, and family and things as well. So to have kind of stepped along that journey myself and still have a very long way to go. I know that there are my peers who don't realise that they might be putting a foot wrong or things like that. It's things that we would love to get expert opinions on, basically.
Well, I mean, I don't necessarily think I'm an expert, but I would love to have some of those conversations, because I think a lot of it is about, having those discussions and having conversations and learning. And we all have, unconscious biases. We all have things, interviewing people as part of the podcast, the amount of other people who are saying, I found myself thinking that, how can I expect my male colleagues to, this is, if we're thinking that as people who are held up as like, this is an example of someone who's going about it the right way. Well, actually, how do we expect other people to do it if we're not having those conversations and if we're not all learning? So, yeah, and I think,
we want to have that conversation.
Yeah, the more places we can have that conversation, the better. So that sounds great.
Cool.
Fantastic.
Right. One of the things we do at the end of our sort of podcast is sort of just briefly mention things that maybe have had our attention recently. We tend to do, Jamie and I, the kind of sort of the last week, because obviously we're here every week. But yeah, what's been grabbing your attention lately? And it could be anything: videos, work.
Ooh.
Yeah, a good book you've been reading.
Well, I always recommend this book if anyone hasn't read it, which is The Power by Naomi Alderman. And it's the idea, it is obviously not a true story, but it's the idea that women get the ability to electrocute people. So if you want to kind of shake up your views on society and power, Power by Naomi Alderman, definitely one. And someone whose content I am loving at the moment and who is just incredible and a real champion of this community is Geeky Faye Art, who you might know of now as Ali.
Yeah, we do.
We're both. I think,
incredible.
I hope that we call both of us are friends of Ali. So
yes.
Yeah.
So yes, if you're not following Ali, you can find Geeky Faye Art on YouTube and Instagram and Twitter
and Discord and
Discord. But yeah, they're kind of two things at the moment that that book is one I recommend to everyone. So definitely The Power by Naomi Alderman.
Cool.
I'm glad you were able to mention Ali, because that was someone I was going to mention as well. Because like I say, their most recent video is such a timely and wonderfully powerful moment to be able to show your true self. So yeah, Ali is a wonderful person and someone that Andy and I both sort of share some work with together. So again, a future guest as well.
Definitely, yeah. She's already said yes. So they've already said yes.
See, we're just in, but we are
just get it wrong.
Trying.
Yeah, it's so easy. We just keep trying. That's all we can do. Anything else, Jamie? Anything else?
For me, it's been relatively mundane. Prepping for a trip next week, so I'm going to see our good friend Steve from Moonshine Metalworks
and Fools with Tools.
And Fools with Tools, the other good podcast. We're going to do some work on his truck next week. So I've mostly been just sorting through tools and seeing what fits in boxes and things like that, and a bit of audio-video stuff, because our TV is not been too well. So finally, sort of decided to upgrade and play a little bit. So mostly just playing with toys.
Sounds a good week.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. How about you, Andy?
Well, for me, yesterday I did a bit of a road trip, as I mentioned earlier. Friend of the podcast, Dale from Maple Tree Studios, had a barbecue. He's looking to move up to Scotland, so he's kind of having a sort of farewell. A few makers there, all kind of obviously done appropriately. Some nice food and plenty. It was nice to meet up with some makers again and kind of sort of see people face to face. So much nicer than being on Zoom or other means. So that was really nice. Other things that grabbed my attention this week. Last week, Jacob from Other Dog Designs, that was in the chat earlier, I don't know if he's still there, created a logo for us, which will hopefully go public soon. Really nice. Certainly done a better job than I have on that. Other things, obviously, been making a bit of art. Another friend of with Jamie and I, Ellen from Crafts with Ellen. She has been a wear tester for Tom Sachs' Nike Craft sort of program development of a new sort of shoe. She's been involved in that, which is heavily into kind of conceptual art and some amazing things. And she was some of her work was put on show in New York for a special gallery showing on the weekend, which was absolutely fantastic. I have a few friends who've been involved in that, and just to be involved with an artist at such a high level is absolutely brilliant concept. And last but not least, another podcast that I've been listening to on and off, Simple Electronics, who I also think is a friend of Geeky Faye and certainly Billy Rubin. He interviewed this last week, or released this last week, an interview with Big Clive. So those who are into electronics will know that man is a legend. Yes, there's Big Clive. Yes. And it was an interesting interview to listen to. Touched on quite a wide range of topics. So I certainly recommend that for those who like Big Clive.
Clive is a very interesting bloke, definitely.
Yes. So I think that covers our week, and we're just hour and a half just hit there. We have a guest next week, Daniel Wood, who is Maker Geek on YouTube and various things. So he's going to be our guest next week. So again, looking for another. I think that'll be an interesting chat. He's an interesting fellow.
Yes, I should pre-warn everyone for next week that I might be either slightly tired or slightly in the car or absent.
Yes.
It's a long trip back from Steve's.
So just to round off, Ruth, best place for people to find you would be?
Twitter or Instagram. I'm at Ruth Amos. Ruth Amos on YouTube, or Kids Invent Stuff on everything. If you just type Kids Invent Stuff on any platform, it will pretty much come up. I think we managed to get the handles on all of those. And look out from hopefully July for They Made It, which is the new podcast that I'm launching.
I'm looking forward to that. I was a bit disappointed last week when I went looking for it and couldn't find it.
Yeah, well, I had to have a bit of a decision of, it takes a while to get on these platforms.
It does.
And International, Women in Engineering Day and all the rest of it. So I even then I thought, it's fine, it'll have filtered through by then, and it still hadn't. So yes, yes, podcasts, interesting, trying to get them on the right platforms, but hopefully I've given myself a little bit of time. So by July, it should all be okay. And very excited to.
I'm sure that will become a thing that's been grabbing my attention when it comes out. So we will give it a push when it does arrive.
Thank you.
And,
from our little platform here.
No, it's great.
All 12 of our followers.
I think we have a few more than that. I'm just waiting for a few more days so I can claim that custom URL, and so that we've got 130.
The joys of YouTube.
Yeah, we've got 138, I think, was the last count on that, and well over 150 on Instagram. So we're getting there. And
I always think if you had those people in the room, like that's a big group of people. This is the thing. True, I think so often we're so used to seeing, very big numbers, and actually, if you had those people in the room, that's a good sizable gathering. So
it is indeed, and it's quite difficult. I mean, again, sort of teaching on this teaching thing here, you're presenting in schools. I mean, it can be quite nerve-wracking, kind of standing in front of potentially several hundred children. I know many teachers who will class of 30 or 32. They're fine with that, but actually ask them to stand in front of and do an assembly in front of a whole school. Not many teachers actually want to do it or are prepared to do it. It's quite an observation.
See, I'm a weirdo. I love speaking, so it's always been something that I've done quite early on. I'm not saying that I don't get nervous, but I do. I love kind of talking to people and answering questions and things. So a bit of a freak in that sense.
It's fitted in perfectly here tonight, though.
Yeah, I think I kind of sort of share that. I can talk as well. We'll share those stories for another time. Right, hour and 33 minutes. We can probably. This will probably go down to about an hour 30 by the time we take off the front end and the back end for the purposes of going on to the audio. So I'd like to thank you, Ruth, for coming on this evening. We really appreciate it. It's been a really good chat. The fact that it's been so lengthy has been really good. And
thank you for having me.
Look forward to you coming back on again. And hopefully we'll. I have to admit, I was at Maker Central in 2019, and I saw you running around and sitting on, I think it was a unicorn that was pooping coloured things. And I kind
Yeah.
of, you did scare me a little bit. And there were so many people there. It was kind of also having to sort of choose people, and I kind of sort of stayed away. But definitely want to catch up with you at Makers if it goes ahead this year, and probably have a good chat, and maybe have I'll buy you a drink or something in the evening.
Sounds great.
So thank you for that, and obviously everyone knows how to contact us, Jamie, don't they? I think now. So
Yeah.
obviously should do, and it's always going to be in the show notes anyway, so it'll always be there. So
If they found the show notes, that's close enough.
Yeah. Show notes be in the YouTube description, which Rasmus pointed out at the early point of the chat that apparently I didn't update last week's properly, but
yeah, we're waffling away with Duncan Band from the little hobby shop.
Yeah,
but with Ruth's details.
I think I possibly forgot to hit save. I think that might be the case. So that'll be sorted out by Wednesday when the audio goes up. Might even be tomorrow. Well, we shall see.
There's another engineering link though, as we're linking through our guests with a common feature.
Yes, and that will carry on next week as well, I think, to a certain extent. So
Indeed.
Certainly sort of what Daniel's doing is very much engineering in his garage, and I think there's a sort of connection through to his work as well. So looking forward to that chat. So I think we should probably just say goodbye rather than waffling on for another half an hour. So it's
thank you again.
Goodbye from me, goodbye from Jamie, and hopefully goodbye from
Goodbye.
Ruth. So, see you all then, folks. Bye bye.
There he is.